On October 20th, 1967, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin were riding horses along the banks of Bluff Creek in Northern California's Six Rivers National Forest when they captured a minute-long clip of what appears to be a large, hair-covered female bipedal figure entering the frame from the left, looking over its right shoulder, and then exiting the camera frame to the right. The footage is the most famous, debated, but never conclusively disproven video of a purported Sasquatch. Wherever there are humans, there are Bigfoot legends. Even President Teddy Roosevelt had his own Bigfoot story. In today's video, we take a look at Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti, the Skunk Ape, Yowie, or Wendigo, depending on where you come from, but more specifically, the Patterson-Gimlin film that is apparently proof of this cryptid's existence. Is the famous film authentic or one of the world's greatest hoaxes? We look at the history behind the film, what the experts say, and what most likely happened when the film was made. Roger Patterson captured something on film in 1967 that has never been completely explained or refuted. The Times Standard newspaper carried the first account of the Patterson-Gimlin film in Eureka, California. On October 20th, 1967, at approximately 9:30 p.m., a reporter received a call from a gasping, out-of-breath Patterson. Patterson stated that he had spent the entire year working on a Bigfoot film. Approximately 8 hours earlier, he and his assistant Bob Gimlin had encountered a Bigfoot near the confluence of the Bluff and Notice Creeks. Patterson stated that the film they took of this creature was already en route to his hometown of Yakima, Washington, via airmail for processing. The journalist met his deadline for the Saturday morning newspaper with an article titled, "Mrs. Bigfoot is Filmed." The story goes that Patterson and Gimlin rounded a bend in Bluff Creek and observed a giant humanoid creature approximately 80 to 100 feet away. "My horse reared and fell, completely flattening a stirrup with my foot caught in it," Patterson said. "My foot hurt, but I couldn't think about it because I was jumping up and grabbing the reins to try to control the horse. I saw my camera in the saddlebag and grabbed it out." Patterson stated that the creature was approximately 6.5 to 7 feet tall and weighed approximately 300 to 400 pounds. "I moved to take the pictures and told Bob to cover me. My gun was still in the scabbard. I'd grabbed the camera instead. The beast had breasts, chestnut hair with a silvery sheen, and an odor comparable to dog out of the rain, rolling in something dead." Patterson and Gimlin were trying to drag their pickup out of the muddy Bluff Creek Basin and heading back to Washington while readers around Humboldt Bay read the out-of-this-world story over breakfast. The following evening, they screened the developed 16mm film to a small audience at the home of Al Diatley, Patterson's brother-in-law and financial benefactor. 4 days later, they screened the film at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver for an audience of anthropologists and zoologists. Don Abbott, an anthropologist with the Provincial Museum in Victoria, said Tuesday he has some evidence to support the film, wrote reporter Tony Eberts in Vancouver's The Province on October 25th. "I went down there. It's a remote region about 100 miles northeast of Eureka 2 months ago and examined many of the footprints," he said. "It's either a highly elaborate hoax or some of these hairy humanoids exist," Abbott said. Abbott presented 2 competing theories. Either Bigfoot exists, or the film is an incredible hoax. John Napier, a primatologist who examined the film at the Smithsonian Institution a few weeks later, proposed a third possibility. Bigfoot may exist even if the film is a hoax. Patterson generated an uproar wherever he screened the footage. Skeptics accused Patterson of forgery and claimed he orchestrated the entire incident because he could not secure adequate funding for his other Bigfoot projects. The infamous footage did earn him a substantial amount of money, though. 9 months after the Bluff Creek encounter, Napier narrated the first mass media examination of Bigfoot, a BBC documentary titled Bigfoot, America's Abominable Snowman. "Is there a Bigfoot?" Napier says in conclusion. "Personally, I'd like to think there was. From my point of view, it's good scientific policy to keep at least part of one's mind open. I've allotted about 5% of mine on this particular issue. For evidence of the authenticity of a film of this magnitude, one must seek out first-hand sources who can corroborate the story. Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin are the most logical first-hand sources for the Bluff Creek account." Patterson stuck to his story until his death from cancer in 1972. In 1968, he submitted to a lie detector test as a prerequisite for National Wildlife Magazine's coverage called The Search for Bigfoot. Although the results have not been made public, it's safe to say that he passed the test, or the article wouldn't have been approved for publication. Gimlin, now in his 90s, remained silent for decades before speaking out in interviews and public appearances to confirm the story he told in 1967. Are there any other sources that have provided evidence to support the claims made by Patterson and Gimlin? Did anyone see them in the Bluff Creek area? Did they speak with family and friends before or after the filming? And did they say anything to support the authenticity or fabrication of their experience? Patterson's information source in Humboldt County was Al Hodgson. Hodgson ran the Willow Creek Variety Store and kept Patterson informed of local Bigfoot sightings. Patterson and Gimlin made their way to the area in 1967 because of Hodgson's report about footprints discovered in September near Blue Creek Mountain Road. Hodgson, who passed away in 2018, verified numerous times that Patterson and Gimlin arrived in Willow Creek around 6:30 p.m. on October 20th to tell him of their amazing encounter. Bob Titmus, a taxidermist and tracker from Redding, California, drove to the Bluff Creek site 9 days after the footage was filmed. Titmus, a Bigfoot devotee since 1958, cast 10 footprints in plaster and drew a map of the creature's movements in 1967. Greg Long conducted extensive interviews with Patterson's colleagues and family 30 years after the event. While the majority of his sources in the Yakima area described Patterson as unconventional, deceitful, and negligent, no one in the family claimed to have inside information that the Bluff Creek film was a forgery. Al Diatley, the Yakima construction tycoon who married Patterson's sister, told Long he had doubts about the film's authenticity, but he never directly questioned Patterson about it. Roger believed there was a Bigfoot. No doubt about it, Diatley said. I don't think he would claim it to be morally wrong to fake it to make enough money to prove it. He didn't take any of the money he made and increase the standard of living for him or his children. He spent it all on proving it. Diatley theorized that if the film were a hoax, Bob Gimlin would be the most probable candidate for the person in the ape suit. The integrity of the Patterson-Gimlin footage has become a decades-long war of words and theories between various disciplines. Anthropologists, primatologists, film and costume makers, and countless amateur commentators have weighed in on the real versus hoax debate. What are the for and against arguments in the experts' opinions of these various disciplines? We, the Bad Things crew, will give you the best of each to form your own opinion, so please comment below and tell us what you think. Let's start with the experts in the movie industry. Patterson, Gimlin, and Diatley screened the film for Dale Sheets, director of the documentary film department and unidentified technicians at Universal Studios' special effects department. They concluded, "We could try faking it, but we would have to create a completely new system of artificial muscles and find an actor who could be trained to walk like that. It might be done, but we would have to say that it would be almost impossible. If it is a man in an ape suit, it's a very good one, a job that would take a lot of time and money to produce. John Green, who owned a first-generation copy of the original Patterson film, interviewed Disney executive Ken Peterson, who, after watching the Patterson film, stated that their technicians would not be able to duplicate the film. Therefore, if Disney employees could not duplicate the film, it is unlikely that Patterson could have done so. One author wrote, Byrne cited his trip to Walt Disney Studios in 1972, where Disney's chief of animation and 4 assistants viewed Patterson's footage and praised it as a beautiful piece of work, although they said it must have been shot in a studio. When Byrne told them it had been shot in the woods of Northern California, they shook their heads and walked away. Professional rivalry is exceptionally competitive in Hollywood, and this rivalry doesn't exclude opinions on the Bigfoot footage. Stan Winston is an Academy Award-winning film special effects supervisor and makeup artist best known for his contributions to the Terminator franchise, the Jurassic Park films, Aliens, The Thing, the first 2 Predator films, and many others. After seeing the footage, he stated, "It's a guy in a bad hairsuit. Sorry." He added, "If one of my colleagues created this for a movie, he would be out of business." He went on to say that the suit in the film could have been manufactured for a few $100 or less than $1,000 back then. If this footage is proof of a new humanoid to science, anthropologists and zoologists would surely be the most logical experts to give a definitive opinion on the creature's existence. As with the filmmakers, there is no overwhelming consensus either. On the 50th anniversary of the film's release in 2017, Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, a professor of anatomy and anthropology at Idaho State University, stated, "It's all so easy to say, obviously that's a man in a fur suit, until you see it up against a man in a fur suit." The History Channel's The Proof Is Out There episode titled Bigfoot Revealed tasked a group of researchers with determining once and for all whether the Patterson-Gimlin film is genuine or a hoax, using the most advanced technology available in 2017. Using cutting-edge technology and artificial intelligence, a frame-by-frame analysis of Bigfoot's movements was performed on the film. Dr. Meldrum, the computer scientist Isaac Tian, zoologist Roxy Furman, and anthropologist Kathy Strain participated in the analysis. There are details that are very distinctive of the way in which this patty creature walks, said Meldrum. One of the characteristics that seem to distinguish the Sasquatch foot from the human is the lack of an arch, a longitudinal arch, which is kind of a springboard, creating a more stable platform in the human foot. Meldrum added, "That lead foot where you can see this upward turning of the toes at the last part of the swing phase just before the foot comes in contact with the substrate. This is a remarkable detail that the film has made more evident." The professor also stated, "I am struck as an anatomist by the massive size of these trapezius muscles and their intermediate attachment on the back of the skull. This is not a human configuration at all, but something that is intermediate between a human and a great ape." Many scientists who have studied the footage have said it is a hoax, but one stands above the rest. A man who has been a staunch proponent of the existence of cryptid creatures. Bernard Heuvelmans was a Belgian-French scientist, explorer, researcher, and author. Along with the Scottish-American biologist Ivan T. Sanderson, he is regarded as the founder of cryptozoology. The self-proclaimed father of cryptozoology believed the creature in the Patterson film to be a human in costume. The film subject's hair flow pattern was too uniform, its breast hair was not primate-like, Its glutes were not adequately separated, and its retreat from the pursuing men was too calm, according to his criticisms. What do we think most likely happened? Every aspect surrounding this story needs to be taken into account, not just the footage, and when digging deeper, we have evidence that this may be one of the greatest hoaxes ever. Patterson and Gimlin became the most fortunate Bigfoot hunters in history when, in the early afternoon of October 20th, the creature obligingly emerged from the woodlands and crossed the clearing for Patterson's camera. Gimlin pursued it on horseback, lost it, but discovered its footprints. They then rode approximately 5 kilometers back to camp to retrieve their plaster of Paris. They rode back, poured plaster into the imprint, waited for it to cure, and then returned to camp. They loaded their horses onto the trailer and traveled 40 kilometers on rugged, muddy roads back to Willow Creek before mailing the film to be developed in Yakima. The apparent impossibility of the chronology of events on the day of filming initially aroused skeptics' suspicions. In response, Patterson and Gimlin began to provide different versions of their story. Other skeptic cryptozoologists, such as Peter Byrne, discovered gaps and inconsistencies in these accounts. Patterson and Gimlin ultimately decided that they loaded the film onto an airplane and flew it to Yakima, where Al Diatley picked it up to be developed. Byrne discovered that the only charter aircraft that could have flown that route that day were grounded due to inclement weather. Since then, few researchers have taken Patterson and Gimlin's account seriously. However, the film was a sensation and continues to generate licensing fees to this day. Diatley supported Patterson and founded Bigfoot Enterprises on November the 1st, just 10 days after the film came to light, and reported a first-year profit of $200,000. As mentioned before, author Greg Long investigated the complete story. Over 6 years, he met with all of the characters who were still alive and numerous other people, including anyone he could find who knew Patterson or was involved with the film. In his book, The Making of Bigfoot: The Inside Story, he detailed his entire experience. What he discovered made for riveting reading. Patterson had been traveling to Hollywood frequently, attempting to promote the concept of a Bigfoot pseudo-documentary based on his 1966 self-published book, Do Abominable Snowmen of America Really Exist? The studios were not interested, but the wildlife film company A&E was. With their funds, Patterson rented a camera and captured pre-production stills of his friends, purportedly on a Bigfoot search, but in his backyard. The proposed title of A&E's film was Bigfoot: America's Abominable Snowman. Bob Hieronymus, a 26-year-old laborer, lived directly across the street from Bob Gimlin. One day, Gimlin told Hieronymus that Patterson would pay him $1,000 for a day of costumed labor on a film set. Hieronymus jumped at the opportunity. A couple of times he got together with the men to test the gorilla outfit and make some alterations. The following day he drove to Willow Creek. He spent the night at their camp, and they shot the footage the next day. A&E's funds were used to purchase the gorilla costume. It was produced by well-known manufacturers of gorilla outfits for carnivals, Philip and Amy Morris. They told Greg Long that they had recognized the suit when they saw Patterson's film on television, and that Patterson asked for their assistance in extending the suit's limbs. They had even sent him additional Dynel synthetic fur. In addition, he was advised to add football headgear and shoulder padding to the suit wearer to make him appear bigger. Unsurprisingly, when Greg Long questioned Hieronymus about the garment, he also mentioned wearing football headgear and shoulder padding underneath it. Hieronymus returned home, where his mother and 2 siblings also saw the suit and patiently waited for his $1,000. Patterson never paid Hieronymus. Hieronymus was afraid that he would be prosecuted for fraud because he participated in making the film when he realized how successful the picture was. As a result, he did not make any other attempts to collect his money, and he never disclosed his part in the film to anybody. For Patterson to eventually return the camera used to film the movie, the camera store had to press charges of theft against him. A&E lost their entire investment, Patterson promptly abandoned their collective pseudo-documentary, and in essence took the film footage that was legitimately their intellectual property. It wasn't until 30 years later that Greg Long was able to put together the entire story by interviewing everyone who played a role in the incident. However, there are still some gaps in the story. Al Diatley asserts that he has no recollection of where, when, or how he allegedly developed or received a film from his brother-in-law, and no receipts for the footage development have ever surfaced. The Patterson-Gimlin footage has been viewed, scrutinized, and second-guessed hundreds of millions of times, but only copies of the original. Adding to the mysteriousness of the footage is that the original is missing. Patterson had transferred ownership of the original to American National Enterprises, which filed for bankruptcy a few years after his passing in 1972. Greg Long subsequently states, Peregrine Entertainment bought the company. Then Peregrine was bought by Century Group of Los Angeles. When Century Group went bankrupt in 1996, Byrne rushed to Deerfield Beach, Florida, where an accountant was auctioning off the company's assets to pay creditors. The company's films were in storage in Los Angeles, but a search failed to turn up the Patterson footage. Convenient, or just another coincidence? We'll let you decide. If you love our content and want to support the channel, feel free to check our web shop where you can find exclusive true crime merch brought to you by Bad Things.